In just over 3 weeks, the world will mark a decade since the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001. And there's growing concern that milestone could inspire a new attack. It's prompting a warning from federal officials to local law enforcement across the United States. But rather than a massive strike like 9/11, the concern is over a smaller but still deadly attack by a lone individual. President Obama himself talked about that in my one-on-one interview with him yesterday in Iowa. I've covered the Middle East for a long time. I've covered terrorism for a long time. And I have to tell you, I'm worried that on the 10th anniversary, or approaching the 10th anniversary of 9/11, Al-Qaeda, or what's left of Al-Qaeda, or their supporters, will try to do something to seek revenge for your killing bin Laden. How worried should we be about that? How worried are you about that?
Well, look, we are vigilant and constantly monitoring potential risks of terrorist attacks. And I think that the men and women in our intelligence agencies, as well as the FBI, have done a terrific job, and Department of Homeland Security. But the risk is always there. And obviously on a seminal event like the 10th anniversary of 9/11, that makes us more concerned. It means we've got heightened awareness. The biggest concern we have right now is not the launching of a major terrorist operation, although that risk is always there. The risk that we're especially concerned of right now is the lone wolf terrorist, somebody with a single weapon being able to carry out wide-scale massacres of the sort that we saw in Norway recently. You know, when you've got one person who is deranged or driven by a hateful ideology, they can do a lot of damage, and it's a lot harder to trace those lone wolf operators. So we're spending a lot of time monitoring and gathering information. I think that we generally have to stay vigilant. There may be a little extra vigilance during 9/11. On the other hand, keep in mind the extraordinary progress we've made over the last couple of years in degrading Al-Qaeda's capabilities. They are a much weaker organization with much less capability than they had just 2 or 3 years ago.
So what I hear you saying is we don't have to worry about a spectacular 9/11 kind of event. More like a lone wolf could do some damage, kill a lot of people, but not a nuclear or radiological or anything like that.
Look, as President of the United States, I worry about all of it. But I think the most likely scenario that we have to guard against right now ends up being more of a lone wolf operation than a large, well-coordinated terrorist attack. We still have to stay on top of it, though, and we're never letting our guard down. That's part of our job.
Well, the president's concerns are echoed in that new warning that's coming out from the FBI and the Homeland Security Department here in Washington. Let's go to CNN's Mary Snow. She's working this story for us. What exactly do these latest formal official warnings say, Mary?
Well, this bulletin alerts law enforcement to the threat of someone carrying out an attack on their own, as you were just discussing, or in a small group. And it also addresses how difficult it is to prevent these plots. A law enforcement official tells CNN it was done more out of caution and not because there's intelligence about a possible attack. A warning is out from U.S. security officials. Watch out for a Norway-style attack here in the United States. It comes just weeks after a lone gunman shot and killed 69 people at a camp outside Oslo and 8 others at a bombing downtown. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security sent local and state police a bulletin stating small arms operations could be employed through a range of tactics from a lone offender, as illustrated by the recent July 22nd lone shooter attack that took place in Norway, to a coordinated small unit attack involving several operatives. No specific threat is cited, but underscoring the concern, DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano reiterated the threat from smaller groups when talking about security enhancements since September 11th.
So what we see instead now are smaller plots involving fewer people, so they are much more difficult to intercept, to pick up information about in time to intercept.
In November of 2009, Major Nidal Hassan was charged with acting alone and killing 13 people and wounding more than 30 others at Fort Hood. The Army base again became the focus of an alleged lone wolf this summer, but U.S. officials say a plot was thwarted with the arrest of an AWOL soldier in July. Now the anniversary of September 11th is on the radar screen for law enforcement, particularly in New York. Ray Kelly is the city's police commissioner.
How do you protect the city against a lone wolf attack similar to what happened in Norway?
We do a series of things. We have a Nexus program where we go and visit thousands of commercial establishments that could be exploited by a terrorist, getting a material that may make a bomb, something along those lines.
While New York is on constant guard against terrorism, working with federal agencies, Kelly says law enforcement continues to check the channels it's always checked since September 11th, and it has police officers overseas also gathering intelligence.
I think we're doing everything we reasonably can do to protect New York, but there are no guarantees.
The big challenge, obviously, is that as someone is acting on their own, they're not communicating with others, making it harder for law enforcement to detect plots and intercept them. And it's one more reason law enforcement is stressing the importance of getting help from the public to report suspicious activity. Wolf?
Mary Snow, thanks for that good report. Let's get some more now on this potential threat from a lone wolf. Joining us, our CNN national security contributor, Fran Townsend. She's a member of both the CIA and Homeland Security External Advisory Committees. Fran, my own sources are telling me there's deep, deep concern right now that revenge could be a factor for some spectacular, maybe not so spectacular attack on 9/11. What are you hearing?
Yeah, well, there is real concern. And when you're talking about the lone wolf, while the President Obama made reference in your discussion to the Norway attack, what people are really worried about are these self-radicalized, those inside the United States, like Nidal Hasan, who had been in contact with another American, Anwar al-Awlaki, the American Yemeni preacher. He's now in Yemen. And they get radicalized by tapes. They get radicalized by the Internet. These are the people that are very difficult to detect because they act on their own. And so while you make the point, Wolf, that they're not going to be able to pull off a 9/11 size attack, they can do a lot of damage and harm a lot of Americans on a day that is bound to be of serious and, a serious sort of and somber remembrance of those we lost.
And it's not just, the assumption, or maybe there's some chatter, who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but they did find evidence in bin Laden's house in Abbottabad in Pakistan that he wanted something spectacular to take place on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Isn't that right?
That's right, Wolf. And, the interesting thing about that, though, is that officials that I've spoken to were quick to follow up and say, look, it was sort of, he was thinking about it, he sort of espoused it, but there was no indication in those materials that it had begun sort of planning or in any way to operationalize it. And so while they're worried about it, I can remember when I was at the White House, you worry about big public gatherings, days of national significance, which provide targets. They really seem to have had a real hard time pulling off even a small-scale individual attack. Faisal Shahzad, the guy who in Times Square who couldn't set the bomb off correctly, the Christmas Day underwear attempted bomber on the Northwest Airlines flight. Look, they've got some bomb-making capability, but even in small groups, they have a very difficult time. And I think that's why you heard President Obama say he worries about the lone wolf. And Nidal Hasan at Fort Hood kills more than a dozen of our soldiers and wounds dozens. Can have a devastating effect, especially on that anniversary day.
Yeah, the president was pretty candid on that issue. Fran, thanks very much for joining us.